Hi and welcome to today's episode, which might not be for the squeamish because we're going to be making some edible, vegan-friendly horror film props. As well as producing delicious plant-based content for YouTube, I'm also an actor and I'm heading up to the Lake District tomorrow for a horror film shoot. The Lake District is a stunning part of the UK. If I can find some stock footage, I'll maybe pop some in for you so you can see the environment I'm going to be in, which makes for an interesting juxtaposition given the content of the horror film. I'm not 100% sure how much detail I'm allowed to go into, so I'm going to keep things to a minimum. But it's an independent horror film centered around a dinner party and things go horribly wrong. In one particular scene, we're going to be needing to eat some brains. The director himself is taking care of the fake head and the brain to go inside it. He's had a bit of trouble with the mold for that, so I didn't have enough time at such late notice to take over that side of the project. So I hope he's figured something out. But he said that the head that the brain is going to sit inside is going to be painted with probably toxic paints. So he said if I could make some chunks of brain tissue that could then be kept safe. So that's what we're going to do today. And I'm also going to make up some fake blood. I've never made brains or blood before, so this is going to be a bit of an experiment, and I thought it might be a fun thing to show for YouTube for any other filmmakers out there who are looking for ideas. If you've seen Game of Thrones, the scene where Daenerys eats the horse heart to impress Drogo, I looked up to see how they'd done it. It's made out of really thick gelatin, which is, if you don't know, it's made up of animal bones and skin. They boil it up, it's collagen. That's what gelatin is. Obviously not vegan. My mind then went back to the halloumi that I tried to make and failed. So the video never saw the light of day. Still got the footage of it, so I'll perhaps slot some in for you. And I was playing around with different starches and different bases to make like a squeaky cheese. And one of the textures that I came up with, one of the ratios, did look very organ-like. So I've settled on using that to make the chunks of brain. And then I'm going to knock up like a sugar-based syrup with some colouring in it. For more ideas on how to satisfy your cannibalistic urgings while remaining a compassionate vegan, like this video and subscribe to the channel. Tap the bell icon if you want to be alerted as soon as the new one's published. For the last month or so, I've been brainstorming ideas of how to do this, and I've been sharing it with my patrons. So if you'd like to get an extra bit of bonus content and also financially support the channel and get some community features as well, I'll leave the link to my Patreon down in the description for you. Like these people who have been buoying me up when times get a little bit rough. I'm going to get the brains on first because they need to solidify before I can start doing anything else with them. When I did the halloumi video, I'd made some notes of the different ratios. So luckily, I had the presence of mind to take a picture of it for future reference. This kitchen is a bit of a magical place like this. Even if I fail at a recipe, it kicks off different ideas. So it's always fun. The ratio I'm hoping is the right one is 1:8. So 1 part powder to 8 parts liquid. So I did one that used a half a teaspoon each of 3 powders and 24 half teaspoons of water. For the liquid, I'm going to use soy milk just to get a nice depth of colour. Because if I use water and try and tint it, I think this is just going to be much more opaque. I'm using carrageenan and kappa. This is a gelling agent, so it's used as one of the possible substitutes for gelatin. So it's got a nice clarity to it. I'll use some potato starch. A lot of gummy sweets use modified potato starch. I'll link to the starches video that I did a while back. I think of all of the gelling agents I tried, this has got the most clarity, like you can see through it. And it's also very cheap and quite stretchy as well. There's a nice amount of elasticity. I'm also going to use some glutinous rice flour. If you ever had a mochi ball, like the little Japanese treats that are ice cream wrapped in the middle of like a stretchy, chewy pastry kind of thing, that's what this is used for. So again, for body, for elasticity, because we're going to be eating this and need to look like we're thoroughly enjoying it, I've got some Valencia orange extract and some lemon. My neighbour's lent me her selection of food colourings. My only concern is there going to be enough red for the quantity of liquid that I need? I've got a few of these glass dishes that I'm going to pour the mixture into. My thinking is that'll form little dome, booby shaped little pucks, and then we can break chunks of those off. I'm going to have a go at making some molds with foil. I might do a few pieces that are that kind of shape, you know, so you've got long, roundish strips. And because these are going to be fairly small, I don't have too much risk of everything collapsing. So we'll make the foil mold now, and then we can do everything else. Initially, I was thinking of using that as the measure, but then I've just worked out on the calculator, and I'm going to end up with at least like 1.5 kilos of the stuff, which is a lot. Yeah, so I think I'm gonna use 2 tablespoons in place of one of those. So I'll like 2 tablespoons of each powder and then 48 tablespoons of the liquid. So I've got some of this Kirkland Signature foil. It's like a Costco brand, but it's quite heavy duty. So we'll put this in and kind of shape it around it like that. That gives me a kind of sausagey type shape. Move it along under another one. So I've got my shapes there. So now I'm going to try and pinch off the ends. I'm going to set it up in a baking tray. No idea how well this is going to work, but we can try. And then we'll head over to the saucepan, start making up the mixture. You want to do everything from cold, because as soon as the gelling agents get hot, they start activating. Glutinous rice flour is going to start thickening as soon as it gets near liquid, but should be okay. I'm going to pour my powders in through a sieve. For the quantities that I'm doing, I don't anticipate not sieving it causing any problems, but why risk it? I'm going to stick this little note to the wall so I don't forget the ratios that I decided on. So I've stuck that on the wall above my stove. This is the potato starch, so I'll do 2 of those. 2 of the carrageenan, and then that is the glutinous rice flour. Give that a sieve. And then I've got a variety of spatulas and a whisk, so I'm going to mix those together. Just in case I forget to say it later, the only reason I'm using soy milk in particular is because I've had this from doing the coffee cake, and I prefer oat milk in coffee, tea and cereal. Plus this has got a nice amount of protein in it. Yay, bonus. Then I'll add the 48 tablespoons of the soy milk. I'm not going to talk as I'm doing this because otherwise I'll lose count. 1, 2, 48. We got there without losing count. Amazing. Go in with the whisk. Just get this combined nicely. I'm suddenly having a worry that soy milk's going to react differently to water, because I can see this is a little bit thicker than water is. We'll figure something out. And I think because it's going to be chunks of brain, I think the consistency isn't going to be as crucial as it would be if you were, for example, holding a whole brain in your hand. I might as well get the heat starting, because this is an induction. You've got to go slowly with the heat so you don't buckle the pan. I keep spotting lumps, and I don't know why, because I didn't have that problem last time. I'm assuming that's because of the soy milk. Oh dear. So I'll give it a vigorous whisk. Just let this continue to heat up slowly. I've been looking online for reference images, and I found this on nature.com. So I'm going to try and get the colour close to this as I can. The issue I'm coming up against in my brain, and this is probably unnecessary, but I like detail, you see. So in horror films, if you see a freshly scooped out brain, it's still going to have a bit of blood flow going through it. So it's going to be pink or pinker, whereas this, I went for like an autopsy picture, because it's not going to be nearly as pink if it doesn't have the blood still pumping through the body. So this looks to have a tiny tinge of pink to it, but then some cream. The oat milk is kind of fairly creamy in colour, but I have got this ivory food dye and a pink. So while I wait for this to heat up, I might actually just see what the colour's like on a bit of paper towel or something. Folded up a piece of paper towel. And I've got like a metal barbecue skewer. So this is the ivory. I've got some on the tip of my knife. Okay, yeah, I think that might work. So these look to be gel concentrate paste type things. I'll dip my knife into that one. Those are the 2 colours there. And I think if I dip the tip of the skewer into the colours and then kind of swirl that into the mixture a tiny bit at a time, I've got a feeling these are going to be very powerful. I'm not trying to make some sort of cartoon looking brain. So it's thickening up. What I might do is pop some of this in the fridge. Yeah, it's definitely reacting differently with the, I'm assuming, the soy milk than it was with just plain water. All right, well, let's try with a bit of colour. So I'm dipping the tip of it in, and I'll kind of drag it through and then work that into it. I think one more like that. Do they want to be brown, maybe? Well, there is no brown. I wonder if I should put in a pinch of coffee. I think adding more of the ivory is just going to make it yellower, whereas I want a tiny bit more brown. Yeah, let's do it. I'm going to put a tiny pinch in. And then I think I'll add the pink and then work from there. I'm going to go quite sedate with this, just because I don't want it bubblegum pink. Okay, yeah, I think that's perfect amount of pink. Yeah, this is definitely much thicker than it was with the water batch, which is going to be a little bit problematic for putting into the moulds. I think that's not bad at all. I do want it a little bit browner. Put a touch more coffee in. It's going to taste a bit weird, but yeah, I think that'll do for colour. So here is the one I put in the fridge. I think I'm going to heat it a little bit higher. I wonder if the carrageninon's not kicked in properly. Last time, I think the mixture bubbled. So let me take it to that point. Pop some in the fridge again. Let's see what the bottom of the pan is like. I'm going to hold off on adding the flavourings until I'm happy that it's ready, because I think heating them up is going to lessen the flavour of them, you know, if they're in contact with heat for a long time. I don't know if that's true, but that's my instinct. I mean, it's very bloopy, isn't it? So that's the fridge one. Much better. Much better. Yes, okay. Those lumps are going to be a bit of a problem, I think. But again, I think because it's chunks, it should be okay. So I'll start with like a half teaspoon of the lemon. Same of orange. Oh, instant hit of citrus. Check that flavour. I'll put some sweetener in. I pulled out the golden syrup for the blood, so I'm just going to chuck a bit of that in here as well. Why not? Bit more flavour in. In fact, when I just said why not, that might affect the setting. Do the fridge test again. No. We're fine. Set up the moulding area. Yeah, I'm not really sure how well I'm going to be able to get this into the mould neatly, into these. I thought it was going to be much more liquid. Try and... Okay. So that's a tray full of brains. Let's fill up these little dishes. Yeah, it's much crumblier than I thought it was going to be. Put these to the side, let everything cool down. We'll move on to making the fake blood. I looked on Google to see if I could find any recipes. Most of them were American and used corn syrup. I've never seen corn syrup in the UK. It's just not something we use here. Then I saw others that used glucose syrup and others that use golden syrup. They're both really thick and I don't think it's going to look super convincing. So I'm going to try making up with caster sugar and water and a couple of other bits and pieces. So this is glucose syrup. You can see how thick it is. This is quite an old jar. It's probably a bit thicker than it would be fresh. From what I can figure out, adding glucose syrup to a sugar syrup or a caramel, it stops it from crystallizing. So I'll put some in, just because I've got a big pot that I never use. I'm going to add some liquid glycerin to it. I'm going to use some of this to see if it helps with the flow, like makes it kind of silky almost. If you're a vapor, this is what they make vape juice out of. So it's got like a slightly oily kind of texture to it. Yeah, like I've had these things in the cupboard for ages and they never get used, so let's wang them in the pot. I've grabbed the golden syrup again, just in case that needs to go in as well. And I might even put some flavourings in it. And then I've got colourings. I've got that amount of the red, and I'm not sure how concentrated it is, but having done the brains, that pink, I might even use some of that to kickstart it, then top it up with red. From what I've seen online as well, is you add a little drop of blue and a little drop of yellow. Red food colouring tends to be very scarlet, whereas we want something more kind of burgundy in colour to be authentic. I'm looking at recipes for simple sugar syrup, which is what you'd use, for example, in cocktails, and it's saying 1 part water to 1 part sugar. I've got a feeling that's going to be quite thin. I'm going to make up roughly a litre of blood, so I might do 700 sugar, 300 water, and see where we go. I'd rather it be too thick, because then we can dilute it on set if we need to. I'm using golden caster sugar in here. The only reason for that is I've got this quantity and then I bought another bag of it when I was making the cake because I didn't know how much I had, and then I discovered I'd already had a bag in my little crock where I keep all my sugars, so I'm just trying to use it up. I've had this bottle of water in the cupboard for ages. Mostly I just want the bottle. I don't really want to put it in glass when I'm travelling, and on a busy film set things can get knocked over, so I think plastic's going to be the way to go. Once I've measured out my sugar, I'm then going to pour the water into the 2 jugs. Typically with bottled water, unless it specifies spring water, it's just tap water that's been filtered and then had a fancy brand put on it. So we'll do 700 of sugar. So we'll head over to the pot, pour the sugar in. I'm just going to go through and kind of press down any lumps and then add 300 mils of water. And then we're just going to let this slowly heat and come to a boil. I might not need to add any of the yellow food colouring because I've used golden caster sugar, but we'll see. And I would advise doing it in a light coloured pan, because if you do it in something black, for example, you're not going to get a good idea of the colour. I meant to put boiling water in. I've just remembered that I was going to do that. Never mind. I'm really hoping that using the golden wasn't a mistake, because I want this to be kind of transparent if possible. Well, I'm waiting on that. There's one of the brains. Yeah, it is very friable, like it's falling apart. So it looks like the golden caster sugar is a problem. Bugger. I can't tell if it's just full of bubbles or if it's cloudy. Do you know what I mean? Ah, okay. It's just suddenly gone transparent. Phew. So I'm going to turn the heat down now. This foam on top, I think, rather than stressing about it at this stage, I'll let everything cool in the pan and then I can try and scrape it off if I need to. So now I'm going to add in the other bits. Just microwaving the glucose at 10-second intervals just to thin it down a bit. I'm going to do, I don't know, probably a tablespoon or so of the glucose, maybe 2. Maybe a tablespoon of the glycerin. Looks a bit cloudier, doesn't it, now that I've added the other bits? Typical. I think I'll do the same thing with the flavourings that I did before. Add those right at the end. I've added the red, so let's give this a stir in. I did probably 1/4 teaspoon. Oh, I was going to do pink first, wasn't I? I'll add that amount of the pink. Yeah, these concentrate paste ones are well, much more concentrated. I think I'll do the same amount again. I'm going to try adding a touch of orange because this is already quite a cool red. Yeah, let's see what happens. I'm going to take a little bit out, partly to see what the colour is like and partly to see what the consistency is like. Yeah, it's a bit pink, that, isn't it? I'm just going to tuck that in the fridge. Probably done about 1/2 teaspoon at this stage. Because that colour looks kind of good to me, but I think it's just a bit anemic. You know, like as soon as you've got a shallow amount of it, I don't think you're going to get that same intensity of colour. So that's the one I cooled in the fridge. Yeah, I think the texture's pretty good. Got a little bit of blue on the end of my knife there, so I'm just going to tuck that in just a little bit. Yeah. I think we're nearly there, you know. So that is before adding the extra amount. Do a dish test. I think we're about there. I'm just wondering whether to add the same amount of everything, just for safety. Yeah, my only thought is that if we end up having to thin it down, it's going to pull that colour back again. I like the intensity of it. So here is the result of the Great Blood and Brains experiment. And I have to say, quite pleased with that. And I was looking for reference images. It looks quite similar to other kind of horror film type brains I've seen. When I'm filming, I keep my main camera plugged into the mains. I did that today, but didn't switch the outlet on. So my battery ran out right towards the end. I added in about 1/2 teaspoon of the orange and the lemon. It already tasted fairly decent, it's just sugary. So I thought, you know, maybe I'll just add a little bit of something in there. Why not? So there's my vat of blood. It does develop a skin on the top, but I think that should be fine because it does break apart quite easily like that. So I'll just make a point on set tomorrow. If we need to do any close-up footage of the brains in the blood, maybe do that as a dedicated cutaway almost. So pour the blood freshly on, just so it all looks best. Like the colours come out really good, like a nice claret colour. And there are the little dishes of brains. So yeah, it is much crumblier and lumpy than I predicted. But as you can see from that little plated one I did, I think that should be okay. The one I did on the plate, I'd used this dish full and I just pulled out bigger chunks and shaped them how I wanted them. And there are some that have got some nice big bits in there. And then these ones here, they've got some really good chunky pieces. Brains are somewhat smooth. They have got wrinkles in them, but not quite to this degree. But again, I think as a horror film prop and as a first attempt at making something like this, not bad at all. That's the texture of it. So yeah, I think that's going to work really well. I get these little syringes from the vets to help give medication to the cats. It might be handy if we need to do a quite deliberate, precise application of blood. It is on the thicker side, but like I said earlier, I think that's better than being on the thinner side because we can thin it, but we can't thicken it easily. So if it is too thick on set, we'll just boil the kettle, get some really hot water and add very small amounts and stir it quite well. and until it's the thinness we need it. I'm waiting for the blood to cool down a bit because I just don't want to pour it into that bottle and the bottle warp because that will just be a nightmare. Time's completely run away from me and I was hoping to be in bed at 10 o'clock, but it is now 7 and I still need to pack, paint my finger and toenails. Yeah, amazing. I'm hoping to publish this video in the next couple of weeks-ish. If I'm allowed to take some pictures on set and if I can get everything timed up well enough, I'll maybe slot some pictures in on screen. Hello, it's me a week after doing the video. I just wanted to give you a couple of updates related to the blood and the brains. I had to paint my nails green for the film and I've just realised I scraped all of that lot off while I was watching TV last night, but I haven't done this hand yet. I'm very bad at girling. The filming day ended up being very long and a bit hectic and chaotic, so I wasn't able to take any pictures and videos the way I'd hoped that I could A, share with my patrons and B, cut into the video. I didn't really want to annoy the cast and crew by saying, well, can you just hang on 10 minutes while I faff around doing something that's completely unrelated to why we're here. It was well after 1 AM by the time we got to the scene with the brains and blood. I did a very quick video after I'd put blood on our victim's head. Something to bear in mind if you are a filmmaker, this hadn't occurred to any of us. If you've got any kind of red lighting, it's going to cancel out the red from the blood. So I was pouring this stuff on and it was barely visible, like it was obviously looked wet. I started panicking, thinking I'd completely ruined the shot because I'd somehow messed up the recipe. But obviously red light is going to cancel out red things. So in the end we switched to a green light and it just looked awesome, like horrifically gory, as you'll see from the video. I realised towards the end of filming the video that I'd used the wrong ratio. I think the ratio I picked was the one when I was making the cheese video that I thought, yeah, that'll make a good base to then start building on. That was 1:8 ratio, 1 part powders to 8 parts liquid. I should have gone for the 1:12. What I'd suggest, make up a very small batch using a small measure, so either a teaspoon or a half teaspoon, even a quarter teaspoon, just to give you an idea. Because ultimately I'm very happy with the consistency. I think it worked, especially in the thumbnail. I think it just looks like very believable and organ-like. But if you do want something squashier, more gelatinous, just up the amount of liquid and I think you'll be fine. I think as well, adding the soy milk changed it from what my expectations were from the water one that I'd done. So perhaps, factor that in as well, maybe add a little bit more water. But like I say, very happy with how it came out. When I picked up the bottle of blood in the morning, everything was fine. By the time we got to use it, it had all crystallised in the bottle. It could be as I was driving up to the shoot, especially over country lanes that are quite bumpy, perhaps all the jostling triggered a crystallisation. I don't know, could be both combined together. Easy enough to fix. I just filled up the sink with hot water and put the bottle in and kept rotating the bottle every couple of minutes on an angle just to get maximum amount. Don't put the bottle in boiling hot water because the bottle will warp, and if it's going onto somebody's face, as in this case, it's going to burn them because sugar maintains heat really well. You get really bad burns off sugar, so just be careful with things like that. If you'd like to get plenty more plant-based recipe ideas, like this video and subscribe to the channel. Tap the bell icon if you want to be alerted as soon as a new one's published. I can't promise there'll be any more fake organs, but they'll always be delicious. And then while you're waiting for the next one, have a look at this.